Everyone, welcome back for the second installment of the value series, where I am talking about all of the ways that I have been devalued in my life and how I strove to overcome those challenges in my life. And many of those challenges are challenges that many of you face. So if you were born in the late 70s, the 80s, the early 90s, you would have been the most impacted by some of these things. If you missed the last video, I'll have it pinned at the end. There actually the entire playlist will be pinned there for you. And then you can watch all of the videos as they're uploaded. I do pre-schedule all of them ahead of time, so you can kind of see what's going to come up next. And so thank you again for coming back. If you're new, thank you. Please consider subscribing. I'm not going to edit that out. This is real life. Sometimes we make mistakes when we talk. So last time, just to kind of give a recap, I was talking about how there was a guy in the guitar store named Randall. Hi, Randall, who had inspired me to kind of do this story. It has been a while, but I just got around to doing the videos. So before I discussed all the ways that I have been devalued. So I was born to a teenage mother and was told that I never would amount to anything. I was incredibly malnourished from eating very nutrient poor foods, and how I kind of overcame that in my life as well. I'm still working on it. It's a long, long road to correct all of that. How I was devalued because I was a child. You would have heard that saying, being seen and not heard. That's the era that I grew up in. I also was very curious as a child. And so because I would seek out the answers, and I became seemingly more intelligent than the people around me, a lot of them devalued me because they would say things like, oh, you think you're so smart. And then because I was a female and because I have brown skin. So let me jump into the next part of this. So there is a very interesting documentary, several interesting documentaries that I encourage you to find. They're on PBS. I hope that you can find them in their archives. And there are two videos in particular. There's one video about how St. Louis is specifically designed to, like, the city planners themselves specifically designed St. Louis to be divided between race and class. Okay, so I grew up in a racist family as a brown person. I grew up in a city that was designed to keep its residents in check, let's just say that, okay, by race and class. And then where I lived in St. Louis also mattered, okay? The second video that I want you to look at is there is a video, there was a series, I think it's POV, point of view, from PBS also. It's an independent kind of film segment that they have about the Peabodys, which is a project, a housing project with Section 8 housing that was in St. Louis that eventually was demolished. But that will give you an incredibly concise history of St. Louis. So between those two videos, if you watch those two videos, you will understand exactly the atmosphere that I was raised in. Okay. Now, as you can imagine, I grew up very low class. So again, my mom being a teenage mom and completely on her own, doing everything by herself, working at McDonald's, working at gas stations. Sometimes I would have to go to work with her. I don't think I ever went to daycare. I don't remember ever going to daycare. I do remember starting kindergarten, and that was whenever there was a such thing as half day kindergartens. So I went to kindergarten for half the day, and then it wasn't until I was in first grade that I think I went to school really with a lot of other kids and things like that. And because, again, daycare is incredibly expensive, and my mom didn't have the money to put me in daycare, so she had to rely on who she could rely on in order to have me taken care of while she went to work. And again, a lot of times I went to work with her at the gas stations that she worked at. And so, you know, being low class in St. Louis, or if people knew what zip code you lived in, then they automatically made assumptions about you. And and it is still true. And I will say, okay, I will say this. I have not gone back to St. Louis in 10 years. Okay. So I have not gone to St. Louis in 10 years. But I can tell you this, the mentality and the culture of St. Louis is really that it never changes. Like, people don't ever move out, people stay where they are. I know a lot of people that move to St. Louis because there are a lot of corporations and there's a lot of industry and things like that. So they move there for professional reasons. But usually, like, no one ever leaves. It's just one of those Midwestern things. You just stay where you were raised, you grow up doing what you know. And that was not going to be me. I was, from a very young age, I was like, I'm getting out of here as soon as I can. Um, because that's not the way that I want to be perceived, is that based on my zip code, I have value. And so I grew up in Maplewood, Richmond Heights, which Maplewood was kind of certain parts of Maplewood were the slummier parts of Richmond Heights. It was like you took a wealthy class municipality and then like attached it to a lower class municipality. And then there was a lot of resentment. Like, if you lived in Maplewood, you were less than. And if you lived in Richmond Heights, and you were like the bee's knees, things like that. And so you can imagine that that had an impact on me, that, I lived on the part of Maplewood. So you can find that the street is a Richmond place. And I can say that because we don't have ties to that house anymore. But that was right on the line of Maplewood and Richmond Heights. So we were kind of living right on the cusp of wealth and more poverty. By that point, by the time we moved to Maplewood, in the house that we were living in, I was 8 years old, and my mom was like a little bit better off than she was before. And so, like, she had bought a house. She was able to get into a program, and she bought a HUD house and she fixed it up. And again, my mom is the type of person that she strives towards her goals, right? And that has been a blessing for me, because I watched my mom, despite the trauma, I watched my mom work towards her goals and complete them, right? And so, in a previous video, I had said that I didn't have any like positive female role models in the Shira video. I had said that. Um, but what I meant was like, like the women in my family, for the most part, that it was like women stay at home, they're barefoot, they're pregnant in the kitchen, for the most part. Like, kind of my mom aside from that, right? And then also, again, like through my own childhood trauma, I couldn't even see some of the ways that my mom was supporting me. And then also, my mom was still going through a lot of her own stuff. So it was just kind of a chaotic mess um, at that time. And so, it really was very difficult to grow up low class in a location in St. Louis where if anyone knew where you were from, they automatically passed judgment on you. They were incredibly prejudiced against you. My age continued to be an issue. So even whenever I was in high school, I was at the mall with my friends and they had these security guards that would walk around and hand you the rules, which I thought was incredibly insulting because they were assuming that just because you were there, you were a troublemaker, which I know that a lot of teenagers were, but me and my friends weren't. So, like to me, that and those kinds of things would happen to me all the time. I would be at the mall and I would be followed by security. I would be, handed the mall rules or things like that. And so, it was incredibly frustrating for me. And then again, as I continued into adulthood, it was, oh, you're 18, you don't have certain experiences, what do you know? Or, oh, you're 25, or, oh, you're 30, or, oh, you're 35, right? Like, let's just stop with the age discrimination. Because the fact is that people know different things than other people. And the knowledge that every person has can bring something to our experience. And again, being a teacher, I have learned so many things from my students that I never had I not been a teacher, I would have never been privileged to know or understand or feel or find value in the experiences that children of all ages can bring into your life, right? So then we kind of venture into whenever I had decided that I was going to pursue a degree in astrophysics. So for those of you that missed the astronomy video, make sure, or a physics and astronomy video, make sure that you go back and check that one out. I won't rehash a lot of those things here, but again, like being intelligent, being brown, being from a poor family. Whenever I announced like to my school counselor that I was going to pursue a degree in astrophysics, they all looked at me crazy. Like nobody believed me whenever I said that this is what I was going to do. It was just crazy to me. And for me, a lot of my students that have said that they were going to do things, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like good for you that you have the confidence to go and do that even if it doesn't work out, right?" But no, I heard a lot of Debbie Downers, negativity, like even my professional choices were being devalued. Okay. So whenever I switched from astrophysics to anthropology, I ended up hearing a lot of the same exact things of, well, what are you going to do with that degree? How is that going to serve you? How are you going to get a job with that? Right. And it was like at that time, I didn't know. It's just what I was being guided to do because, again, go back to my spirituality video. I have listened to my intuition every step of the way in my life. And this is where I'm at now, right? So you can't deny if you listen to your inner voice, what's going to happen. We'll come to find out the reason why I needed that degree in anthropology is that 10 years later, whenever I became a teacher for immigrants and refugees from around the world, I needed to be culturally sensitive in order to interact with them or have some kind of idea, and not be like an ignorant, unknowing, unaware type of person. I was better able to serve my students, right? So you can kind of look back and you can see how some of these decisions that I didn't know why I was making them at the time, how they then played out years later, right? By listening to my intuition, listening to my inner voice, my inner guidance, praying, and then listening and watching for the answers to my prayers come through to fruition. Then the next one, people, I promise you I'm 39. Okay. So I all the time still, and this was a huge problem whenever I was a teenager, especially. I have a young face and I don't know how I have a young face. I don't know why I have a young face. I just was born with this face and I don't have any control over this face other than putting on makeup if I choose to, right? And so When I was a teenager, I all the time was pegged as being younger than the way that I looked. And so adults would really talk down to me. You know, when you talk to a child, listen, people don't know how to talk to children. This is the way that you talk to children. You talk to them like you talk to an adult because they're a human. You don't necessarily use the same vocabulary. You don't use the same tone. You don't use the same intonation. But I talk to my kids like I would talk to anyone else. I would talk to my students like I would talk to anyone else. I didn't use a baby voice with them. I didn't, a lot of those things that used to happen to me, I don't do with them. And that has made a huge difference in my professional career because I know what it is like to have been devalued because I appear to be younger than I actually am. And so, again, that would play out in many different scenarios. As a 20-year-old, I would be walking through the mall and I would be handed one of those slips from the security guard to not shoplift or not cause trouble or to not do whatever in the mall, right? I'm 20, okay? Um, Before I was pregnant with my son, I had a much higher pitched voice. So one of the things that can happen, your testosterone, so the baby's testosterone goes through your system, and then you can have like a little bit deeper voice, things like that happen, these chemical changes. And so my voice is a little bit deeper than it was whenever before I was pregnant with my son. But whenever, especially I was in my 20s, my high pitched voice, I sounded like a kid. I sounded like a 9-year old. So anywhere that I would call, right? Like if I called the credit card company, no one took me seriously because they thought I was a kid. They would have me re-verify my account. I don't know how many times. There were so many times whenever I would call to order pizza to have it delivered that they would not take my order because they thought I was a kid. I had to go to Pizza Hut and I had to talk to the manager and we had to create like a secret code or like a secret PIN number so that every time that I called to order pizza, I would have to give the PIN number so that they knew that it was me ordering the pizza because I looked young and I sounded young. My stepdad, he had his own business, and every time there was this one lady that called, and at this time I was 21, 22 years old. This lady would call and she would say, "Oh, is your daddy home, little girl?" And I'm like, "I'm an adult." Even now, I go to pick my kids up from school, and teachers that do not know, or kids that do not know that I am their mother, think that I'm my daughter's sister. Also, my daughter's really tall. She's 5'3" and she's 10 years old now. Okay. They still think that I'm her sister. Like, people don't believe that I am as old as I am. Okay. So, yes, I'm 39 at this time of the shooting of this video. It's September 12th. You can't tell I do have gray hair. So I purposefully don't dye my hair so that there's some kind of like, this person looks older kind of thing. Because if I dyed my hair, then I would look too young, right? Because people don't take me seriously because I have a young face. So if that's you, I feel you. We're in the same club. The next thing is my weights. And then after I talk about this, I will pause the video again. And then I will start talking about the other topics that I have on the list. So again, as a child of extreme poverty, of extreme trauma, growing up during the 90s when processed food had just exploded out of seemingly nowhere, whenever it was such a big thing and people didn't understand nutrition really, like the very intricate, minute details of how food is processed within our bodies. Okay. I ended up gaining a lot of weight. So in second grade, I was already very overweight because, again, of all the reasons I had just listed. And, you know, as a third grader, I was still very overweight, and it basically, my weight just continued to go up from there, despite the fact that I was very active. So I swam, I walked everywhere that I needed to go. So in St. Louis where I lived, you could take the metro, which is like a light rail trolley kind of train thing through the city, or you could take the bus. But I didn't need to, because where I lived, everything that I needed to go to, especially my friends, like my friends were in walking distance, the store was in walking distance. As I got older, the doctor's office was in walking distance. So I just walked everywhere that I needed to go. And I was still very overweight, and I could never figure out why. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't, like, just as I got older, I just kept getting more weight. So by the time I hit 16, my thyroid just was so low. Well, now I know, okay, after all of these years, now I know nutrient deficiency caused autoimmune issues. Remember, I had did long COVID video where I was sick all the time. So again, like, lack of nutrients were at fault in that, again, from being malnourished, again, from being in poverty, right? These are some of the problems that come along with that. And so I developed hypothyroidism, which is an autoimmune condition. And I went to go see a doctor who prescribed to me medications that only treated my symptoms, did not get to the root cause. And so you guys can go back to my plant medicine video. It's one of the very first videos that I have posted here on my YouTube channel, and where I talk about, essentially my plant medicine journey and where that took me. But I stopped weighing myself whenever I got to 250 pounds. And I, like, the largest, I can't even remember my largest pant size, but I just remember that I got to the largest pant size. If I had to guess, I would say I was about 275 as a 17, 18-year-old. And again, I was still pretty active, as much as I possibly could be, going to high school and trying to manage, like, work and going to school at the same time. And so, you know, that was, and I'll talk, and again, like, I have a lot of videos to make, but I'll talk in another video about my weight journey and what that has looked like for me and what I have discovered in that journey. Because, you know, a lot of our society places value based on your weight and how you are perceived. So especially in the 80s and 90s, if you were overweight, you were lazy, you were uneducated, you didn't, you were not a valuable participant in society. What could you do? So a lot of shame came along with being overweight. And the more overweight you were, the more pressure was put on you to try to lose weight, but without understanding the reason why you were that heavy in the first place. I cannot even tell you how many times I went to the doctor and the doctor was like, all of your problems would go away if you would just lose weight. Like, they just pegged being overweight or being obese on, like, all of these medical problems that I was experiencing. And even whenever I did start to lose weight, so I purposefully got a job at a gym so that I could start to learn health and nutrition when I was 18. And I had graduated from high school. And I started to exercise and exercise and exercise. And a lot of the weight like I changed my diet, I started to exercise, I started to lose weight, but it wasn't like I got to a point where it wasn't enough and I couldn't go to a doctor and figure out what was wrong with me because doctors are not trained in critical thinking in order to understand the root cause, at least in that time, maybe now, but then no, it was symptom pill, symptom pill. So I really had to try to figure it out for myself. And so my weight loss journey, going through the shame, eating disorders during that time were huge, like bulimia and anorexia were huge. There was a huge emphasis placed on weight as a way to decide who was valuable in a society and who wasn't. So, with that, I am going to take another break and I will be back shortly with the next few topics. I hope that you're enjoying this or that you're resonating with it because, again, in the conversations that I've had with people, a lot of these things have come up recently that I wanted to address. So, I hope that you're finding value in all the ways that I have overcome being devalued. Thanks so much for watching and see you in the next video.